Chapter 6. The Birth of New Consciousness. Having spoken about the formation of the planet, the next step would be to talk about how consciousness is brought into that sphere in order to experience. The angelic host are one, as you are one now. But within that one of the angelic host, there are many aspects or facets of the one. It is a degree of individualization that is lesser than the degree of individualization you are experiencing at this time in physical matter. But nevertheless, it is a degree of individualization. What makes it a lesser degree of individualization is the fact that, within the angelic host, it is known that the individualization is only a facet, whereas here on earth you see individualization as a barrier between yourself and others, so that you become a universe in your own right, and do not acknowledge that you are part of the universal that is around you. When a planet is created, via the methods that we have talked about earlier, it is then decided that a certain number of facets of the angelic host will visit that planet in order to experience what the planet has to offer in terms of expansion of experience. Because all creation exists to expand consciousness, to push limits, to examine new fields of influence, to allow the individual and the whole to grow and to evolve. The universe's creation is a constantly evolving concept, so that each planet is literally brought to mind, as we have said, in order that the experiences that the new planet can offer will help those facets to grow and to evolve spiritually and creatively, and bring back to the whole a new angle on creation and new possibilities. Each planet is set up by the angelic host or council with a particular set of circumstances built into it that will allow certain areas of each facet of the angelic host that visits it to evolve. Within the angelic host, there then takes place a quietening of those members of the host who have decided, through free will and volition, that they wish to travel through the landscape of that particular planet so that they can evolve themselves and bring back to the host the fruits of their experience that will allow the host and the Godhead to also evolve. So a number of facets of the angelic host are quietened and put under the supervision of other members of the angelic host. It is like separating a number of sheep, a bad analogy perhaps, and taking them into a particular field where they can still see the other sheep, but are cordoned off and watched over by sheepdogs to see that they are kept together and no harm comes to them. What a bad analogy! It suggests that there is nothing more than a sheep mentality to the angelic host, and that is totally wrong. I am trying instead to give you a picture of how certain facets are not divorced from the whole, but are taken to one side through their own volition. Perhaps you could say that they go into another room within a great university, and for a while a notice is put on a door that says, "Quiet, experiment in progress." And all those who are beyond that door are sheltered from the goings-on of the whole university, until such a time as they have gone through the experience that they have chosen to enter into. So, a number of facets of the angelic host are brought into a quiet time, so that their thoughts are concentrated on the journey at hand, much as you, when going on holiday, would forget about the everyday work, the house and the finances for a time, and instead concentrate solely on the holiday ahead, because that is where your interest lies. Then, having become quiet, a portion of the make-up of each facet of the angelic host is projected and sent as a beam of volition into the area of the planet that has been prepared for the purposes of a specific evolution. And that projected concentration of attention and consciousness of each facet takes the best form in order to experience the aspects of that particular planet. It is solidified somewhat, so that the portion of each facet of the angelic host can be given sufficient locomotion to experience the physicality or solidified thought of the sphere in order to evolve through the experiences the planet has to offer. In this case, we are talking about the Earth. On the planet side of that beam, the portion of consciousness of each facet of the angelic host is clothed in a concentrated but temporary solidification of thought that gives the appearance of physical form, both from outside of the facet and from the inside. So that portion is given a further sense of individuality and becomes a citizen of that planet for a short time, in order that it might progress, experience, and evolve as it moves through the landscape. Not landscape as in trees and mountains, but landscape as in the matrix of opportunity that the planet has to offer the evolving portion of the facet of the angelic host. Please understand that in perfect circumstances, as they originally were on Earth, the angelic facet and the personality on Earth are in constant connection, so that the personality on Earth, whilst enjoying the illusion of individuality from the facet that it really is still aware that it is part of the facet. Similarly, the facet of the angelic host that has projected the beam of concentration of life force and energy towards the Earth is aware of the facet being animated on the planet. Whilst the projection is on the planet and enjoying the illusion of individuality, the rest of the fragment of the angelic host that remains within that room can now project other areas of itself back into the university beyond that room. Having accomplished the task of projecting part of itself into the planet's landscape, it can also, to a certain extent, enjoy the other aspects of its being and consciousness that it had before it entered that room. But it remains in that room because it is important to have contact with the part of its consciousness on Earth, so that part on Earth can experience, through moving through the landscape and opportunities of the planet, and can pass back those experiences along that beam to the fragment of the angelic host, so that that facet of the angelic host can evolve. It is like having a child in another country that is in constant contact via a mobile phone. But it is more than that, obviously, because the feedback from the aspect of the angelic being on Earth is far more sensual and all-embracing than a simple telephone call. It is like having a child away from you who is reporting back, and there is communication between that aspect of the angelic fragment and its projection or child on Earth, so that, if the projection on Earth is unsure how to act in certain circumstances, dialogue can go backwards and forwards to say, well, perhaps we should try this, or perhaps we need to experience that. In ideal and original circumstances, there was communication between the angelic fragments and their children on Earth. Then, at the end of a period of time, which is determined by whether there is anything more to be gained by experiencing certain aspects of the planet, when nothing more can be gained by travelling through that particular setup, the projected beam of consciousness from the fragment of the angelic host is pulled back to itself from the Earth. There is a dissolving or loosening of the belief in the projection or shell that surrounds the child of the fragment of the angelic host that is on the planet, so its cohesion as a physical being is lessened and relaxed. And once it is relaxed, there is a retraction of that child back to the angelic fragment. Here there is another miracle of creation, because, having experienced individuality as a projection into the planetary landscape, and having gone through a set of circumstances where it is conscious of itself and communication with its angelic parent, when it returns to the angelic parent, it is part of that parent, but it is also an individual as an angelic being. Another analogy. As a result of having gone through this act of separation, communication, and reintegration, creation brings forth further angelic individuality. Because from returning children from a planetary sphere, you have the birth of new angelic beings. You can see how the mechanism is set up for evolution of experience, but also evolution of consciousness, and the peeling off of consciousness into further beings while still retaining that link to the whole. You can see, without me saying too much at this point, because we will go into it further, that there is a type of parenthood and a type of birth that is undergone in angelic realms, and that what you witness here on earth with the production, as you see it, of further individuals through birth, is a solidification of a process that goes on a God level and on an angelic level. And so originally the earth was set up, as all planets are set up, to permit experience, to further growth, and to promote the further expansion of angelic consciousness, while at the same time enhancing the consciousness of the angelic hosts who are putting their time and their projection into that particular planet. Those angelic hosts, having retrieved their children, that then set out on their own journey in visiting further spheres, then reintegrate or go out of that room into the university and introduce, as it were, in great joy and great bliss to those others in the university, their children, the products of their thought and the birth of their thought into further individualization, which, it must be stressed, is not really individualization, but an extension of the whole into further facets. And so it was with the earth at the beginning. That was the function of the earth, and that still is the function of the earth. Except things went wrong. And I must explain how things went wrong the next time we meet. What we have talked about will be revolutionary to your readers. To suggest that angelic beings give birth is not something that has been put before the people of earth previously or in other texts. I pray and hope that I have explained it in sufficient detail without making it too complex. But I would invite questions to clarify anything that you feel has not been explained sufficiently to this point.
Do we, each of us, still have some kind of link to our angelic parents, even though we've got lost on the way? Is there still that link?
The link is always there. And that link to God and to greater self is what we are promoting through the other books that we have put out. There has been a loss of consciousness, but not a loss of the link, and we are aiming to have you rediscover that link and your core. It is not a new concept. It has been with you, but buried and masked for millennia, and it is time now, at this important point in the evolution of the earth and your civilization, to remind you of that. So the answer is yes, most definitely that link cannot be otherwise. If you consider the laws of the universe and the ways of creation, everything is linked to everything else, always. Your specific link to your angelic parent, or your oversoul, if you want a common term that is used in other books, is always there. Another question, please.
When you talk about the angelic host fragmenting, is that what we understand as reincarnation?
Reincarnation is something that will come up in a later chapter. The fragmentation is an example of the ability of the angelic individuals and the host to create, and, having created and prepared vistas, to then project parts of themselves into those vistas. What I hope it explains better than anything else in this chapter is the need for heavier matter and the purpose behind heavier matter. Heavier matter is the solidification temporarily of communal desire to set up a matrix of circumstance within which experience can be gained. You can see physical matter as the temporary holding together of projected thought, and that is the nature and necessity of physical matter, the temporary holding together of thought, so that a landscape can be created through which projections of the angelic fragments can experience and bring that experience back to the whole. Reincarnation is a repeated pattern, and is a repeated pattern here because of the effects of the fall. If you consider what we have said in this book thus far, if you have passed through a landscape and have gained all there is to gain by being immersed in that landscape, what benefit is there to revisiting that landscape? None at all. None at all. Particularly when there are so many other projections of experience waiting for you and for your children. Why come back to visit and go through exactly the same circumstances when you have already learned from them and absorbed into your being their implications? Reincarnation is a peculiar aspect of the fall, which we will explain as the narrative unfolds. Does that make sense?
Yes. So originally, to use your room analogy, a fragment of an angelic host would project into the sphere of a planet, possibly once or maybe more than once.
If you have an angelic host, then an angelic host, by the name itself, suggests a great many individualizations. So a number of angelic fragments or facets would decide to come into this particular room to project part of themselves into the planet's matrix. Having moved out of the room with their children into the whole, there are others who then wish to come into the room, others who wish to project, and others who have not yet gone through those experiences. Without diversifying too much from the narrative that we are trying to get through to you, I have to tell you that in that university there are other rooms. There have to be, because those rooms lead into the matrices of other planets. And beyond those, there are rooms that lead into the matrix of a galaxy, the matrices of star systems. And so the angelic host exists and experiences. The nature of God is never just to exist. It is to exist and experience, to exist and grow. So there is a constant, fantastic moving around of fragments of the angelic host into other rooms, in order to experience other matrices and in order to bring back other experiences to the whole. Then the planets themselves are withdrawn from physicality and new ones are created. Always within the sphere. Always within the dot within the circle. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
So it is an infinite and infinitely exciting, rewarding and challenging celebration of consciousness, of being, of existing, of changing, and of bringing new individuals and new experiences to the whole. Because remember, each of those individuals that comes back to the parent, or angelic fragment, is different to the angelic fragment. The angelic fragment is enhanced by the experience that its projection has had on Earth, but the projection itself is coloured to a greater degree by the experience it has had firsthand, and so has a different outlook on creation and brings a unique viewpoint to that whole. All those viewpoints are coming back to creation all the time to allow creation to draw on its established viewpoints and its new viewpoints to create different avenues, different aspects, different planetary experiences and different universal experiences. I hope I can transmit, through the very flat written word, some of the joy and bliss of the continuous creative act and what lies ahead for you once you remember who you are, which I hope we have gone some way to explain to this point. Is that a sufficient answer?
Yes, thank you.
Joseph, my mind is spinning now.
My mind is also spinning.
I could do with some verbal clarity. What I am hearing is that actually people on Earth who acknowledge themselves as spiritual beings and who are working with that in mind should spend less time worrying about past lives and future lives as we consider it, because it isn't as we understand it. Because we, as spiritual beings, rejoin our angelic host and keep our individuality, and we actually create.
Yes, The popular view in so-called spiritual circles is that you are a sum of your lives and that reincarnation is brought into play. And I hope that this book will go some way to expand the spiritual minds and spiritual hearts of people on earth. I have always said to you that you are angelic beings, and I am delighted to have reached this point in our journey of communications where you now see that you are indeed angelic beings, and why I have said it to you. There is no difference between you and the angels that come to visit you, except in confinement, and it is self-confinement. We are moving very close to that part of the book that then explains how what should have been a single experience for you became a repeating pattern, and how the landscape that should have brought you joy was turned to bring you misery. So yes, you should concentrate always on your limitless potential. And limitless means that you do not indulge too much in who you feel you were and who you feel you are going to be. Your point of power is now. Your connection with God is now. And the bliss that I have tried to get across to you this morning, again in the flat written word, is accessible to you now. As you accept who you are, you break the crystalline bonds that are around you, that have restricted you for millennia, and you begin to shatter the pattern that you believe in to such an extent that you think that there is nothing else. That is a very important aspect of our work together, to convince souls that what they feel is so solid, so immutable, and so familiar is really just an energy pattern that has become solidified and confined. They should, in their meditations and approach to God, allow God to lift their expectations, to remove their shackles, and to immerse them in that feeling that will transmute them and allow them to bring light to the planet, to change it, and to free the prisoners. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
I must just finally, before I leave, talk about spiritual logic, and how important it is that the people who read these books try to maintain a spiritual perspective and use spiritual logic. By that I mean that many of the so-called spiritual theories that are promoted around the earth are nothing more than attempts by the field to re-immerse its prisoners in itself. This book must be tested. My other books must be tested. And any approach to spirituality must be tested by taking the concepts within. Not into the head, because the head will produce more complexity, more prison cells, and more confinement, but to take the concept into the heart and ask, does my heart sing when contemplating this concept? In other words, does my heart resonate with this concept? Does it feel logical, not through the mind, but through the heart? Those things that feel logical truly through the heart are the ones you should follow. But those that come up short through the heart are the ones that are really influences and illusions brought up by the field, and they should be set aside and moved on from. Clarity of thought and spiritual truth comes from the heart and not from the mind.